Uh, Good morning or good evening to all of you, wherever you are. Welcome to this uh, year's DAIDA Awards, in which we got some very interesting theses. Actually, the level of the thesis was very high, we found. But I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about DAIDA. It's a foundation based in the Netherlands. Uh, and we do we support financially some of the small projects in different parts of the world. Our basic mission is to uh, support the living conditions, improve the living conditions of those at the lower end of the pyramid in cities of the emerging world. That is our broad mission. And this means that over the years, we have supported projects uh, from South America till Asia, but also in Africa. But we remain a small foundation based in the Netherlands. One of the initiatives which we took a few years back was to create this DAIDA Awards. The idea was that instead that we would help uh, students to choose projects which are not only academically or aesthetically relevant, but actually socially and environmentally too. And I think to be able to do that, what we decided was we would every year agree on a particular theme, which could then be used to request universities from around the world, and then through the university, students from around the world to address those issues. A couple of years back, we had, for example, climate change as a theme. Last year, minorities was a theme. And this time, in which you all are participating, the theme is, of course, you know it, addressing the contradiction between nature and the city, a landscape and the city, so in a broad way. The people who are going to judge you, they're all here. There are 4 of us. I'm one of them, but the other 3, let me introduce those 3 to you. Afaq, can we have the jury members on the screen? Yes. So on the top right side, you see Liesel Vivier. Liesel is has a lot of experience. She comes originally from Zimbabwe, studied at the University of Cape Town and Delft University, also in Netherlands. And she's based in the Netherlands, comes originally, like I said to you, from Zimbabwe and South Africa, and has a reasonable knowledge of the state of the art issues related to urban planning and urban design, but also understands cities of the emerging economies. Left below is Claudio Ascioli, originally from Brazil, at present in Germany, but every year when we have this program, he's in some other part of the world because he has been consultant, he's extremely experienced and has been consultant in many organizations around the world, including organizations of the United Nations, Habitat, etc., etc. He's also an architect and an urban planner, has a lot of experience in writing research, but also judging them. So he is there, he's just at present in Bonn. Then the younger member of the jury just now below right is Ashim Manna. Ashim Manna is also an architect and planner. And he's just, if we would have had this program maybe 1 month later, I would have called him Dr. Manna. He's about to get his doctorate from a university in Belgium next month. And his issues are related very much to how we address landscape and what do we do, how do settlements in vulnerable landscape can best be placed, etc. So he's very specialized in the subject which we are dealing with today. I am myself an architect and a planner, urban designer, did my training originally from India, but for the last 50 years in Netherlands. I have studied in India, but also in UK and at Delft University here in Netherlands. The what we are going to do is this. There are 8 of you who are shortlisted. We will ask first, we'll give a chance to the first 4 candidates to present their thesis to us. Each of you gets 8 minutes to present. As you present, there will be a clock on the screen which will remind you that which works itself down to 0, so you can see how much time is left. We will follow the time strictly. So please make sure that you have presented the important things in those 8 minutes. 7 minutes after that, the jury members have a time to ask you some questions. After 4 candidates have done their work, presented their thesis, that is roughly an hour from now, we will take a 15-minute break. In that 15-minute break, it's of course a break also for us for a moment, but also we will run a film on DAIDA Global Awards. There's a 13-minute film which shows some of the subjects which you have dealt with, but some of the candidates like you before who have won the awards, what they did with it, what it meant to them in the career which followed. I think that is roughly what I have to mention just now. And I think I can now, I'm sorry for the slight delay because of the technical glitch, but I think I've kept my speech very short. And I think we can now start by requesting Harshika Verma to present her thesis to us. Harshika, over to you. She's from Catholic University Leuven. We have 3 candidates from Catholic University, which is for the first time we have had this, that in the shortlist, 3 from the same university have come in, but this time the level, well, they earned it with the quality of their work. So here they are. Here's Harshika Verma.
Okay. Good morning to everyone in Europe, and good afternoon to those joining from India. I am Harshika Verma Click. Next slide. A graduate of KU Leuven, and today I'm excited to present my master thesis, Adaptive Landscapes, Accentuating Resilience in the Embedded Landscape of Little Run of Kutch, India. So in this presentation, I'll discuss some challenges, key interventions, and the potential impact of my work on both people and planet. Next. This research, completed over 3.5 months, addresses the challenges of global warming, climate change, or as Margaret Atwood aptly calls it, everything change. As it's not the temperature which is changing, but the sea level, salinity, aquifers, forest, desert, the whole habitat is moving and changing the relationship between human and non-human agencies, affecting vulnerable people the most. And according to WHO, this crisis could kill to 50,000 additional deaths annually among poor communities by 2050. So next. In Little Run of Kutch, marginalized communities like Agariyas, the salt workers are deeply affected by water scarcity, desertification, and forced migration. And by studying 3 distinct cases at this different scale, my thesis explored how landscape urbanism can empower these communities while restoring ecological integrity through adaptive, context-sensitive, and circular strategies, thus directly aligning my work with this year's competition theme. Next. So the first case is a temporary village associated with salt production, where seasonal settlements relocate annually with brine availability in dry months. highlighting their transient nature and dependence on seasonal dynamic water landscapes. These villages face increasing disruptions due to lack of infrastructure. Next. So the second case is a permanent village impacted by salinity intrusion, where huge salt industries disrupted the native biodiversity. And historical orchards once cultivated by agarias during the monsoon period have been invaded by non-native species. And this invasion has led to the abandonment of public squares, which have eventually been converted into the dump yards. Next. The last case is also a permanent village with freshwater scarcity, and due to the shift from seasonal agriculture to year-round farming. And this change has increased pressures on aquifer with more borewells, impermeable spaces for seasonal storages, and waste generation. The Garia's housing, typically limited to one kitchen and a bedroom, highlights their inadequate living conditions. And since they have stopped migrating, their need for more space has led to street encroachment. And these former salt workers now lack employment and face social marginalization as they are often perceived as least valuable contributors to the community. Next. So the design interventions are focused on the permanent villages, creating multidimensional resilience through new collectivity and self-sustainability. Next, in the presentation, I'll focus on the South Village, which is highlighted now on the screen. Next, where the ecological resilience is enhanced by integrating native ecologies into boundary berms, livestock spaces, and introducing polycultural farming of drought-tolerant species. Degrading lands have been indigenously restored into pasturelands and wetlands, benefiting both the villagers and native biodiversity. Finally, reclaiming and reviving eroded lands has led to rethinking new ways of living. Next, where the new housing for agarias provide a collective living space for the salt workers during the monsoon, and in dry season it transforms into workspace for women, seasonal farmers, construction workers, and other artisans. By accommodating temporary activities within the same space, the design creates more open space for water infiltration, and by bringing together diverse ethnicities, it seeks to bridge social gaps and foster inclusivity. Unfortunately, I cannot go into too much detail about this, but these drawings show in very detail even the seasonal processes. For example, like the fences built by salt workers that you can see in the bottom. Next slide. In the monsoons, and then they are being stored and reused by the secondary residents. Next slide. In the dry season. And there are many such more details that are also there. Next. So besides that, I tested the site soil and proposed material ratios to reuse the excavated site soil with urban agriculture and animal waste. Next, please. This approach not only creates a geological balance, affordable housing solutions, but also generates immediate employment opportunities by training these seasonal workers into circular construction techniques. And through this design, I also hope to catalyze a cultural shift where there is more appreciation for circular resources and indigenous craftsmanship. Next. So now, if we arrange these proposed architectural solutions in a circle, we see that the spatial changes correlate with the productive activities and the different seasons during the year. So this diagram shows that the project ultimately creates a symbiotic relationship between the settlements and nature by aligning design interventions with the seasonal rhythms of landscape. The thesis redefines urbanization as a process that coexists with nature. Next. Next, please. Yeah. It also prioritizes participatory design, ensuring that all local voices are integral not only to the development of proposals, but also in its implementation, which fosters a sense of ownership over the initiatives that shapes their lives. And by all local voices, I mean not only the diverse human communities, next, but also the native trees, animals, and other indigenous species that form an. Can you go please on the back slide? I'm so sorry. Yeah. So, but also native trees, animals, and other indigenous species that form an essential part of the local ecosystem that I try to highlight by these white boxes. Next, please. So I started with small scale projects to explore how site specific landscape strategies could create conditions for both people and nature to thrive. And then I reimagined a new form of urbanism at territorial scale, which is guided by the complexities of topography, the dynamics of hydrology, and the seasonality of climate. This project serves as a scalable model for addressing similar challenges in other semi-arid regions as well. Last slide, please. Yeah. So, in conclusion, my thesis highlights the socio-ecological aspect of landscape urbanism, highlighting that solutions to environmental challenges must blend ecological, social, and cultural dimensions. It promotes a holistic approach to sustainability and hopes to inspire new ways of addressing the urbanization nature contradiction. Next. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Ashika. I'm going to now, I'm looking at the
Thank
jury
you.
members. Claudio, Liesel, Ashim. Liesel, would you like to ask a question? Start with something? Do you have something on your mind straight away? Or
Yes, I do.
You do? Yes.
I have a question straight away. Yeah, I really like this presentation, very clear. I like this thesis a lot as well. And you know, the range of interventions that you suggest go from urban design interventions, you know, making those rainwater holding systems, right down to architecture interventions. So what I was thinking, you know, as you were speaking, I was wondering which of those interventions would require sort of the government or the municipalities' help, and how much of these interventions do you think people can do themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would thank you for your question. Uh, so I would start from your first question, which is which most of the interventions which require government help or municipalities help. So I would say probably providing, let's say, collective housing, because right now these people do get subsidies, but that amount is not enough. Besides the resources that the construction materials or the labors that they use, the techniques, which is concrete buildings and all, are also expensive in terms of if we compare it with reusing the waste materials, for example, the agriculture or the urban. So what happens that there are many such houses if that I also tried to show in my thesis with the photographs, are left unbuilt for several years, let's say 5 or 10 years. So the thing is, if the government modifies, let's say, that policy, and then they provide this collective housing to these salt workers in return, where they can work when they come back in monsoon season. They can work in, for example, government projects of land remediation or water management. So I think that would be really sort of co-support in terms of that government gets the employees. These people also get the employment, but also they get to get a nice living environment to stay. The second question is how much strategy interventions, for example, they can do by themselves. I think most of them are that I propose on really micro scale are more community oriented project that we are also trying in some villages to do. For example, is micromanaging these collective farming techniques and for example, construction. I do talk about in my thesis a skill building of these natural construction techniques. So if they have the waste that is getting burned, for example, the agricultural waste that creates pollution, the plastic waste that dumps and contaminates water, they do collect it, but then what they do, they sell it to the waste management, I don't know, the team. So instead of doing that, in which they get very small amount of money, they can reuse. And if we try training them in how to make reuse these excavated site soil and waste, they can create without much of government's help the housing for themselves. So I think those solutions could be one of the really helpful
Okay, thank you.
interventions.
Thank you, Harshika.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you with time. Claudio, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your presentation and the way you construct your analysis and your argumentation for your proposal. You spoke about a new form of urbanism as a way to bring to scalable approaches and solutions. Can you please clarify that and explain, but please be concise. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. When I say new form of urbanism, I in my last slide I try to show, for example, that now what happens is there is no sort of relation in development of these settlements with respect to the productive landscape. So what first I do is I talk about how we can scale up these water like techniques in which we try to avoid this water erosion that is happening along the steep slope. And then I organize dispersal of this settlement along the seasonal stream, so that these villages get access to this rainwater, this torrential during the monsoon season. And then I talk about how for example, they can start remediating or these degrading lands by doing some farming techniques or the agroforestry and all, so that these lands that are getting degraded with the water erosion, when people settle next to it, they just not get benefit, but also the environment gets benefit from them. I hope I was clear enough.
Yes.
Thank you.
How much time left, Afaq? Less than a minute. Ashim, you have a question? Anything specific? Otherwise, we'll
yes. Yeah.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Harshika, thank you for your presentation. It was very nice to see your work again. I would like to ask you one small question, because you talked about agariyas and you highlighted that, that they settle within permanent and non-permanent settlements, if I understood it correctly. And you talked about the cyclic system. I really wanted to understand that, how these occupations are made, often reclaimed and again left. I mean, sometimes people would also abandon sites. The way you show your final plan, it seems that, everything becomes very strong in terms of its urbanization or so is there something, which you would account for that, some sites would be taken and some sites would be abandoned gradually, and then, these people keep moving, basically about their migratory patterns.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, this migratory pattern is not sort of permanent, and it's basically seasonal. So when the Little Run of Kutch, which is a seasonal marshland, when in dry season it dries up, all these salt workers go there and settle for 8 months, and they make their temporary housing and make salt productions there. And then they come back to their permanent villages where they sort of struggle to get employment, but they live for 4 months there. So technically they spend more time in their temporary housing, but what in my thesis I tried to highlight that these what challenges they face there. So probably one of the potential further research could be how can we make their their living conditions in the temporary settlements better. And the second is when they come back here, they don't get enough space because it's just for 4 months. So what I tried to do is, if they have, for example, adequate amount of living spaces, and they get to have a good lifestyle in monsoons, and when they go back in dry season, those spaces can be utilized by other communities. So it's like trying to correlate all these. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Harshika. I'm sorry. I think we have to be fair to everybody, so that the time is up. But
definitely.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank
we
you
will
so much.
now go to the next, and that is a presentation by a partnership, Hasse Peters and Ruben de Jager. So the floor is yours, and you are also from Catholic University Leuven, and you'll be taking us to a totally different part of the planet, to Vietnam, etc. So welcome.
Hi, we are Ruben and Hasse, and for our thesis, we made 2 booklets. Gradients in Vernacular Tissues describes our analysis from our fieldwork in Vietnam and Cambodia. And in Bridging Cultures, we make the transition from the very lively neighborhoods of the Mekong Delta to a quite sleepy village in Flanders called Lint. It may sound weird, but sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the best stories. But if you take a closer look at it, it's maybe not that weird at all, because there are a lot of principles and practices from vernacular tissues and gradients of the Mekong Delta, where Flanders and more in particular village development and urbanism can learn from. So we took some key learnings that we gained from our time in Cambodia and Vietnam and that we wanted to implement in our design. Living in dimension is the first one. On the picture, you can see tube houses. They are typical from Vietnam. And they have a fixed width, but they can extend on and on and on in length, allowing families to grow and create different layouts and configurations. The changing seasons in the Mekong Delta also affect the interaction between built environment and the landscape. For instance, raised floors and flexible interiors are used. Or as you can see here through the platforms, different interactions with the river are created throughout the different seasons. In Vietnam and Cambodia, it's also part of the culture to care for your family and your parents. So it's common for children to stay in their parents' home and extend the tube houses or go live nearby. This keeps family bonds strong and creates an intergenerational living environment. Ponya can be literally translated as family garden, and in our fieldwork we saw it as the heart of a household where family and social life come together. Can be at the back of the houses, underneath the houses, or in between the houses of a cluster. Hem refers to a complex network of alleys and passageways that weave throughout the urban landscape. They serve not only for circulation, but also for social and commercial functions. Pocket gardens are small productive spaces located at the back of the houses. They're used to plant fruit trees or grow small crops for personal consumption. And in the overall communal space, pocket gardens provide a more private outdoor gradient. Traditional houses are made from lightweight materials such as bamboo, textile, wood, or steel. They are mostly locally sourced and flexible, allowing structures to easily adapt to the seasonal floods of the Mekong Delta. And then lastly, the Mekong Delta is also a good example of a landscape where residential and economical functions are mixed. This creates a vibrant neighborhood where city makers like street vendors, craftsmen, and small business owners are seamlessly integrated within the urban fabric. So now we will explore how we can apply all these previous key learnings from the Mekong Delta to a typical Flemish village named Lint. These key learnings have transformed our way of thinking as architects. And our main takeaway is that in Vietnam and Cambodia, gradients are formed and nothing is perceived as black and white like we do in Flanders. We have an inside and an outside, a wet and a dry, but there's this whole continuity between the two. And that's why we try to introduce different gradients in our design. The first one is gradients of density. The white square indicates where our design site is, and across the village, a lot of different development projects are planned on former open areas, with a continuation of low density occupation of the landscape. So one of our design strategies is doubling the average density of flint and integrate it all into our design site. In history, the forest belt of flint has been significantly reduced. So our second and third strategy focuses on reforesting lint by enhancing the existing geometries of the forest, which creates forest rooms. And with gradients of use and gradients of publicness, we want to introduce a mixed use to revitalize the neighborhoods instead of the distinct functional zoning that is there now. And then lastly, the site's topography reveals a lower lying section that is vulnerable for future floods. So therefore, we propose implementing an interconnected water buffer system.
And the combination of these gradients creates different rooms in which they can coexist. So some being more prominent than others, but the three types of rooms created are forest rooms, public rooms, and common rooms. And this approach creates a vibrant and interconnected urban environment that enhances the quality of life for the residents. So in the forest rooms, our focus will be on rewilding and revitalization. And we are using the existing microtopography of the site to create wadis and ponds as a natural infiltration system. And also the existing vegetation will be expanded with local species adapted to the various degrees of wetness. Also in the forest room, the concept of non-human common will be applied. So this is a zone entirely dedicated to nature. We want to introduce new innovative communal living typologies. So a modular system of prefabricated CLT construction allows for various linking and stacking possibilities, enabling different housing typologies to be combined. So this is fostering an interesting mix with, for example, intergenerational living, but also many other types of social interactions. And these axonometries are showing one possibility of how the modules can be stacked and linked, creating different living combinations. And communal spaces are created in the forms of platforms, courtyard gardens, or rooftop terraces, but also all modules have their own private outdoor spaces created within the exoskeletons in red. So this ground floor plan is showing the combination of private units in gray, communal spaces and economic areas in red. And the flexibility of the units allows for the integration of economic functions within the clusters, contributing to the vitality and economy of Lint. And the adaptable layout of the units allows the interior to change with the sun's position throughout the year. And this design ensures that the spaces remain comfortable and energy efficient year-round, seamlessly adjusting to seasonal variations and the changing sunlight. And this roof plan is showing one potential cluster development within a common room surrounded by forest corridors. And alongside the trees on the left, public alleys are running from the main street so that villagers can reach the public rooms without crossing through the clusters. And this illustration is showing that the exoskeletons for the private outer spaces can be adapted flexibly according to the residents' preferences, so that can be filled in with sun protective panels, textiles, or even the integration with a winter garden is possible. The concept of the forest rooms doesn't have to be confined only to the Zevenhuizen site, but it can actually spread like a kind of virus across all of Lint. And in this sense, it's no longer the humans, but it's nature that is taking precedence in the open areas and determining where the humans can settle, or more importantly, where they cannot. So in conclusion, we have learned that cultures can learn from each other and blend in meaningful ways. And this journey has broadened our perspective as architects, moving away from the more Western, individualistic and uniform building methods and opening us up to a more inclusive and adaptable approach. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hasse and Ruben. I have a question actually before I ask other people, other jury members. Do you seem to? It's a very interesting exercise, learning between trying to transplant ideas from one culture into the other. But the question is there a need in Belgium at all to build like what you are suggesting? Sort of. I would also be, because what you saw in the Mekong Delta is based on the cultural structure which is prevalent there. Now, the structure in Belgium society is totally different. So forget the climate, because inside, outside, like you said, very interesting. But I live here and I live once in a while in India, and we live differently because of the climate also. So that presumption itself sort of seems a little doubtful to me. And how did you go about finding out if there is a need to do something like this in Belgium, in Lint?
Yeah, first of all, I think we didn't do a copy paste from Vietnam to here, but that's why we included the pink reference projects, because they were Western projects and we tried to combine them. But in my opinion, there is a need for such a housing in Belgium. Nowadays, the real estate is very expensive, and I think you only can afford apartment or house when you are two working people. But people like us, young people, people who are just living alone, elderly people or vulnerable people, it's very hard for them to find accommodation. I think I started in October with working, and I just can't afford something, a small apartment or something myself. So I think
we also hope that this project maybe can become like a shift in the mindset of people, because here we all want to live in a big house alone with a big garden, and then they just go back and people say living there and it's way too big. So that's why we introduced this adaptable.
Okay. Thank you. Other jury members, Ashim, Claudia, Liesl, do you have a question?
Yes, hi, I have a question. Ruben and Hase, thank you for your presentation. It was very nice and interesting to see, how you're translating your fieldwork into practical applications. So I have a very specific question, and I think it might also sound similar to what Shyam has asked. These two contexts actually come from very distinct socio-cultural crises. I mean, it's interesting that you've made this comparison and, you're trying to learn from it. But during your presentation and your explanation, you highlighted that, there are certain groups which are vulnerable, this crisis about housing and how, affordability is an issue. So I really wanted to know your perspective on how have you learned from the socio-economic and ecological crisis which drives people in Cambodia to live in a certain way? And did you find several similar, or comparable vulnerabilities, that sort of, forced you to go and adopt similar strategies in Belgium? Thank you.
When we were there, it's not that like all things in Cambodia and Vietnam were positive. We also saw like the crisis there and modern developments taking over, and people were forced to leave. But we saw that the people there really wanted to like maintain the traditional way of living, and they somewhere like ripped apart, and like families had to like spread to different parts of the city. But they all wanted to stay stay in this like community that they had built. So that's what we like mainly took away from it, that they live together and we live kind of separate. So they were more like combined against the crisis, and we are all like in a separate way fighting.
Separately fighting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Liesl, Claudia, any questions? Anything else?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Liesl. You were the first one.
Okay. Thank you. I have a very practical question, because I noticed that in the designs that we make, parking is always a huge issue, and how takes up a lot of space, and to make underground parking is very expensive. So quite often the parking determines how many housing units one can make on a piece of land. And I didn't see any parking spaces in your design, so I was wondering how you had thought about parking in this situation.
Yeah, that's actually really Lint specific. I don't know if you can do it everywhere, but we analyzed Lint and we mapped all the parking spaces. And also when we walked there, it was just, there's an overload of parking spaces right now. So a lot of like open areas are parking lots. So we calculated it. So we didn't really need any additional parking, but we also kept in mind that we calculated it with the thinking of that in the future there will be less cars. So I don't know how many cars per family we calculated, but we didn't need any more because there was an overload already. But we are aware that you cannot do it like everywhere.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Claudio.
I pass on my questions given the time. I think they responded to the questions made by our jury members, and yeah, well done. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, and by the way, I forgot to say, but lovely images and a very clear presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. We will go now to the third presentation. Isabel Verhagen from also Catholic University Leuven. And she's going to take us to Portugal and talk about that. Isabel.
Good morning, good afternoon all. My name is Isabel Verhagen and I will present you my thesis work in which I address the contradiction between settlements, landscape impositions and nature in the dry plains of Baixo Alentejo. Baixo Alentejo is a sparsely populated rural region in southern Portugal. It is situated on the edge of 3 watersheds on the driest plains of the area. Baixo Alentejo consists of an endless, undulating plain covered with open forest, the so-called Montado. In the Montado, vernacular settlement types are embedded. In the Montado, vernacular settlement types are embedded within the oak forest, and farmers subtly interact with the forest ecosystem without destroying it. I see that my slides are not moving, but I'll continue my story. The delicate balance between settlements and ecosystems has endured for ages. Notice on the map.
Okay, we'll give you 8 minutes again. Okay.
Okay. So hello again, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Isabel Verhagen and I will present you my thesis work in which I address the contradiction of settlements, landscape impositions and nature in the dry plains of Baixo Alentejo. Baixo Alentejo is a sparsely populated rural region in southern Portugal. It is uniquely situated on the edge of 3 watersheds on the driest plains of the area. Baixo Alentejo consists of an undulating plain covered with open forest, the so-called Montado. In the Montado, specific vernacular settlement types are embedded within this open oak forest, and farmers can subtly interact with the forest ecosystem without destroying it. This delicate balance between settlements and ecosystems has endured for ages. Notice on the map the vastness of the Montado in 1954. However, this landscape of the Montado is rapidly being disrupted when national and global policies take over. First, due to the construction of dams and reservoirs from the 1950s onwards. Large-scale irrigation led to Montado destruction, loss of biodiversity, and a depletion of the storage capacity of reservoirs and underground aquifers. Secondly, after joining the European Union in 1986, extractive landscape impositions rapidly changed the remaining forest landscape into a game board of speculations. This new, seemingly diverse forest landscape hides a reality of subsidy schemes for plantations and irrigated crops. Only a fraction of the Montado remains. All these landscape impositions soak up all the water, they erode the soil and push the territory towards a point of no return. Usually there's a carpet of grasses and flowers in winter, which alternates with a sun-drenched, desiccated landscape in summer. However, climate change and these critical current water management systems threaten to keep even winters dry. Furthermore, all these exhaustive landscape impositions are increasingly made over the heads of local aging populations. They fail to bring added value to them, and they hit them unusually hard as they deplete the drylands and suck up all water. Left behind is a landscape in distress in which all livelihoods are erased. As a so-called solution to all this, the region is being fed by a centralized, over-engineered, ever-expanding water management system. This system transports water over more than 100 kilometers, crossing various watersheds and putting great pressure on water resources. Time has come to rethink this water system in crisis. Time has come to reverse this trend of extractive landscape impositions wrecking nature. In order to reimagine the future, I'll delve deeper into the village of Almodovar in the south of Baixo Alentejo. This is the riverbed meandering along the village. However, in reality, there's no water in the river, except for some small water puddles. In the north, the continuous discharge of treated wastewater into the riverbed alters the natural condition and the ecology of the river downstream. Furthermore, the expansion and dispersion of the village involves new constructions. This drawing shows the retaining walls of these new constructions that cut into steeper slopes on the outskirts and change topography. The village core is surrounded by plantations that suck up small or large amounts of water. And the last element are the schist stone walls that separate agriculture fields. All these elements form ingredients for the design. I will present 4 design strategies that aim to transform this extractive water regime of Almodovar into a sustainable one. At the moment, there's a big dam upstream of Almodovar that blocks the water towards the village. In my first strategy, I break down this dam and I rethink the river as a sequence of river islands in a dry riverbed. Check dams slow down the water and create new types of public spaces along the edge of the village. A cascade of water catchments holds water for a productive landscape that feeds the villagers. A second strategy reinvents the voids that emerge in the historic village core due to the abandonment and deterioration of houses. By transforming these voids into seasonal gardens, they catch water during rain events, they address urban heat islands, and they improve access to open, green public spaces. Furthermore, the hard infrastructure of the retaining walls is rethought in order to collect and let infiltrate water, and as you can see, a rhythm of tree lines emerges on these terraces. The last strategy proposes microcatchments in the agricultural fields in order to reduce soil erosion and let foster an ecology of various species. The village of Almodovar serves as a test case. There's no longer a centralized, ever-expanding water system that exploits all water resources. Instead, the capacity of the local natural water system defines and supports the size of villages and management practices. The future of Baixo Alentejo is reimagined by designating the region as a nature park. The landscape is no longer purely productive and certainly not exposed to new extractivism. Nature rewilds and takes over ruins of abandonment. Ample space and time is given to grow an autonomous forest undisturbed by human activity. This forest offers an alternate habitat for non-humans and as a sponge, it re-strengthens the natural water cycle. In this parkland, villages and towns act as point of exception. They accommodate what cannot be done in a natural park, and the villages are left to shrink. They are left to shrink to a level that is in balance with an ecological restoration and the carrying capacity of the natural water system. In conclusion, this thesis is a test. Facing the static conditions of rural areas, it seeks how to make rural areas stronger and more resilient without returning to the past. The work presents feasible strategies that aim both radical and incremental transformation. And lastly, grounded in the ecological conditions of the territory, the work proposes a new forest vision and settlement strategy embedded within the age-old Montado, and it offers a new socio-ecological balance between agriculture, forestry, and living within a semi-arid landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. After the initial glitch, you have done it well, just presenting everything and very clearly. Claudio, I'll start with you if you have a question to ask.
Yeah, thank you. Very solid presentation. I was curious about when you start thinking about reinventing solutions and urban interventions, looking at infrastructure. Now, to which degree or what would be the conditions for you to be successful with what you are proposing as a thesis?
I think the main aspect of the thesis is to rethink this big infrastructure of multiple dams that use all that block rivers, use all water for the irrigation of different crops that are water intensive and maybe not suitable for that area. So I think one of the main strategies when I, for instance, talk about Almodovar, and I refer to rethinking a big dam that at the moment blocks the water and uses all the blocks the river and uses all that water for irrigation of vineyards that do not grow there naturally, then I would think that could be a solid reason to rethink this big dam, rethink this idea of only putting big walls along the river, and rather think about how this can be more incremental, how there can be smaller interventions such as check dams I propose that also try to interfere with the natural flow of the river, but in a less radical and a less negative way, and rather use it as we can see how the practices in the history has how these interventions are supported by ideas, how they have been working and living with the water in the past. So I think that's part of the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ashim, do you have a specific question, or Liesl?
Liesl has her hand.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Liesl.
I have a question. Do you? I think if I understand your thesis correctly, it is sort of an either-or thesis. You know, I mean, you say instead of having those big imposed infrastructural water systems, you propose sort of a more local, to use more local water systems. Mm-hmm. But those big constructed water systems, they exist now. Mm-hmm. So what do you propose to do with those? Is it something that you can do, you know, you can keep those going, but you must improve the local water system, and you must sort of try not carry on making those big infrastructural changes? You know, can these two systems exist side by side? Or do you sort of abandon the big water system and don't use it at all anymore?
No, I think since quite some of these big dams are recently being built, you cannot just close it from one day to another or reinverse this intervention. I think for now, it's since the region I've been working on is located on the farthest link from the whole proposition of connecting all big dams. So today in Portugal, the biggest dam close to my region is empty. So that's why they're proposing to connect it with pipes to other dams and connecting over more than 100 kilometers. So I'm proposing, so that this is a proposal, they are working on this at the moment, but I'm trying to rethink this idea and trying to find another solution. So instead of trying to refill dams that continue to get empty, I think about another way of dealing with the water. And of course, I'm aware that you cannot close all dams at one time, but I think it's more a gradual transition. And I think the area where I'm working, which is on the driest plains of the region, and seeing all the locations of dams and how they are trying to connect those, I think it's an interesting location, and there's quite some potential to start rethinking the water system in this area.
Okay, yeah, good answer, clear answer. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, you did talk, Isabel, in your somewhere in your presentation about reducing the number of inhabitants. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a natural process which is going on, which you say you will build upon, as it were, or?
Indeed, at the moment, there's a depopulation of the area. And so I'm taking this aspect into account and seeing the reasons why people are leaving. I assume, I imagine the villages would keep shrinking. And then since I'm working with this living, the system of settlements that are the size of the villages should be supported by what the local territory can hold. It could avoid, for instance, lots of tourists coming to the area, since this idea of working with the local capacity of the water system would prevent of making lots of swimming pools for tourists that would then lead like the villagers would then have to leave the area if they cannot afford it anymore. So that's why I work with the existing trend, and I try to think on how to avoid foreigners or tourists coming to the area, but instead how local people could still be able to live there.
Okay, thank you. Afaq, do you still have some time, or? So shall we, Ashim, do you have anything quick, short question to which a short answer is necessary? No?
Yeah, Isabel, I really liked your presentation. I mean, I'll make some remarks rather than a question because they've been answered.
Okay.
I really understood it very well that, you sort of put an analysis and you sort of, extracted the spatial framework over which design could be built. And I really appreciate, what you said that, it should be left to shrink. There are several regions in the world where depopulation or, decaying of the urban form can sort of, revive socio-ecological systems. I think my only comment would be that, and you have sort of repeatedly asked, answered it. Maybe, moving ahead, you can actually try to, understand how the water cycle could work, so that it sort of counters these large infrastructure which would come in future, Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have, for the morning session, let's say, the last presentation by Angie Carolina Camacho Guterres. I'm sure I've said it wrongly. So please say it when you come on, how you exactly pronounce your name. You're from the University of Stuttgart in Germany, and you will take us, you'll be talking about Colombia. So the floor is yours, Angie.
My thesis is titled Valuation and Collective Action for Biodiversity along the Fucha River in Bogota, Colombia, and it focuses on the concept of urban biodiversity, which is often underestimated in planning exercises, but that is crucial in maintaining the ecological balance in cities. This is also particularly relevant in global southern cities and in countries such as Colombia, which besides being a mega diverse country has also very strong social movements that are supporting environmental causes in urban areas. For the research, I conducted a literature review to identify the research gap, and I found that on a global scale, there are critical gaps in understanding the relation between people and biodiversity in cities, and that the studies are usually not globally representative. For the global south context, I found that people often have a different or even negative experience of urban nature that can be related, for example, to climate change events. And for studies focusing on Colombia, I found that the urban nature has been used as a vehicle by social movements to contest urban commons. And these studies, they also highlight the need to harmonize these collective actions of the social movements. So the literature review led me to adopt the two guiding concepts of my thesis. So on the one hand, the valuation, because understanding how people value urban nature is fundamental to assess the conservation of urban green spaces. And on the other hand, the concept of collective action, which is highly relevant for the context of Bogota, because there are several civil society organizations that are actively acting on the defense of natural assets. From these concepts, I came to the formulation of my two research questions, which I divided into: first, how do people value biodiversity along the Fucha River in Bogota? And second, how do people act collectively in favor of biodiversity along the river? Of course, the research methods are directly aligned with the questions. So for the first question, I adopted a quantitative approach, conducting questionnaires with users of the river surroundings. And these questionnaires, they explore the topics of cultural ecosystem services, anti-services, preferences, and behavioral intentions towards biodiversity. For the second question, I adopted a qualitative methodology, conducting interviews with active civil society organizations that were operating in the river environment. And the interviews, they examine the topics of their agendas, of course, their collective actions, and the challenges of implementation. Finally, the results of these methods led to several discussion topics, which I will touch upon later. The questionnaires, both the questionnaires and the interviews, they were conducted in the field, involving visits to around 14 green formal and informal spaces along the river, and also 5 key sites where the civil society organizations were actively engaged. And in addition, for the analysis, the river was divided into 4 different sections, considering the different ecological and urban context conditions. Coming to the results of the first question of how do people value biodiversity, I found that people value the cultural ecosystem services better in scenarios with an increased biodiversity, and that the cultural heritage was the most valued service, while the spiritual services were the least valued. In terms of the services, most of the dissatisfaction with the river environment was not related to the ecosystem itself, but rather with the external aspects, such as the pollution or sociocultural aspects. There were, of course, also specific ecosystem disservices, and the most common was the presence of animals such as rats or snakes. When asking about the biodiversity scenarios preferences, the respondents, they preferred non-canalized river, high biodiversity scenarios, and environments with trees over shrubs. And the guiding factors of these preferences were either the color or the familiarity with the plants. Finally, most participants, they expressed willingness to take action for biodiversity, particularly through planting or cleaning actions, though this intention decreased downstream. Regarding the second question, the interviews revealed several types of collective actions that were directly improving biodiversity. Some were centered on, for example, plant-related initiatives such as the border renaturalization or urban gardening, and they also involve the management of organic or solid waste, as well as political mobilization efforts focusing on monitoring the ecosystem interventions. On the other hand, there were actions contributing to enhance the value of the river or of the ecosystem, including actions on the public space, along with the environmental educational programs or cultural activities that were celebrating the river significance. It was also quite interesting to notice that the intentions of most of the collectives, they were going beyond the intention of preserve or enhance the ecosystems, and they were touching upon different topics such as, for example, indigenous or peace and culture preservation, food production, strengthening community connections, etc. So for the discussion, I categorized the findings into 3 aspects: influencing valuation and collective actions. They were ecological, sociocultural, and urban management factors, and I'll just mention some of them quickly. So for example, for the ecosystem scale perspective, I found that a healthier ecosystem enhances the valuation and amplifies the potential for collective action. It was interesting to notice also that despite the river deterioration, the river still holds a very strong cultural heritage value. From the species point of view, I can highlight the fact that there is an overall preference for greater plant diversity and for a more natural river, and that there is potential for collective actions, especially in plant diversification efforts. Regarding sociocultural aspects, I argue that there is potential of enabling agroecology in urban riparian environments, as well as some other proposals from the educational and identity reinforcement actions that could help protecting or enhancing biodiversity. And finally, I highlighted also the 3 main urban management aspects, which are currently drastically affecting people interaction with the urban river and its nature. For the conclusions, I highlight 4 statements which are also closely related to the follow-up proposal, and are that first, a healthier ecosystem leads to a better valuation of its biodiversity and also to a greater diversity of actions, collective actions, and that there is a great opportunity along the river for citizen-led initiatives supporting biodiversity. And I will leave it like this for now, and I'll thank you all for listening.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Any of the jury members who has us? Claudio?
Yes, thank you. I was very much interested when you started categorizing the discussions and coming to the, I would say, the 4 aspects: ecological, social, cultural, and the urban management aspects. Given the emerging conflict that there is as we increase urbanization and we have a river with all its vulnerable, sensitive kind of areas, how did you see this let's say the future when you talk about the interaction of water management, waste, and housing? Did you further think about this as you conclude your thesis?
I think that the urban management aspects, they were very present when analyzing the results. But for the research itself, I decided not to focus particularly on them because they were also too large, in a way, too complex. And instead, I focused on the ecological aspects because I was coming from the argument of understanding the potential of urban biodiversity in cities. But they were all very present, and I definitely think that from a different perspective, one could focus only, for example, on how the water management in global southern cities are influencing our relation with nature or our experience of in the city itself.
That is true. Your questions and in survey, you demonstrated the responsive attitude of the residents regarding the urban biodiversity. Yeah, thank you. Quite interesting.
Ashim or Liesl?
Yes, yeah.
Ashim, you have.
Angie, I have a question for you. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see that you have adopted a very serious methodology to come to analyzing a specific element in the city. You have not been you've not been discussing about the whole city, but you only talked about the river, because you highlight that you have a bias about collective action, and that's how your research was driven. So my question is not about what you have done, but it is about how can you take back all of this knowledge which you have gained, and all these insights, and you've brought down certain precise points for action. How are you going? I mean, what would be your strategy that you can take this back to those civil society actors, or or to these communities, so that that they can take it forward and make the collective action, or do the action on ground? That's my question.
Okay. I think that one way of taking back this knowledge is maybe to let them recognize all the real improvement that they are doing in this surrounding. Most of these collectives, they are not directly acting on urban nature, but they have other more relevant agendas, but that are somehow relating to the nature and to the better perception of it. So first, I would say would be the recognition of it, and I think that this exercise is also part of it. And secondly, in the thesis I argued that there should be a more flexible way of supporting them. In many of the challenges that they were highlighting, of course, there was the institutional resources challenges, and they were also related to the fact that policies are usually very strict in a way, and for example, acting on the border of a river due to risk, of course, factors is very limited. And they still do actions in the river surroundings, of course. So showing that there should be a more flexible opportunity for them to expand their actions, to scale up their actions. I think that would be a next step.
Yeah, thank you.
Liesl, any question?
No, I don't have a specific question. Thank you.
I have, we still have a couple of minutes, is it right? Afa?
Yeah.
Okay. So Angie, I have this question. I think indeed what Ashim said, you talk about collective action and you talk about a specific issue of biodiversity, how to increase it in a river. But obviously it comes at a cost to something else, I presume, because or have you been able to show that it doesn't come at a cost, but actually if certain policy is taken, then biodiversity will increase, and in the long term, the gains will be much more than the costs, in whichever way you want to define it. Because unless that is done to some extent, what is the direct value of this? I mean, how do I see this being interpreted? That's
I didn't really focus on how could an increased biodiversity affect, let's say, some other some other realm in the city. I think that the direct value of an increased biodiversity, I related very much with the of course with the people. The people benefits from it, and especially from
okay. So that's
especially from this. No, sorry.
No, carry on. My mistake. I should be listening. Yes. Okay,
especially from the perspective of cultural benefits, which are usually not that studied, but rather economic benefits. That's what I.
Okay. But cultural benefits are also, I mean, that's also something fine. I mean, it's not I'm not specifically asking about costs in the terms of financial costs only. Okay. So and the benefits can be non-financial benefits. So that's absolutely fine. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we will take now a 15-minute break. And in that 15-minute, I think Afaq, you will run a short film on the DAIDA award winners of the previous years. And we'll see each other in another 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Welcome to all of you again. I think the next participant is Shweta Deshmukh from Kamala Raheja Institute in Mumbai, India, Master of Architecture, Urban Design, and she'll be talking about lakes as urban connectors, the case of Kolhapur city in India. So Shweta, you have 8 minutes from the countdown which Afaq gives you.
Hello everyone, this is Shweta Deshmukh and my thesis topic is lakes as urban connectors enhancing socio-ecological identity. So starting with the thesis introduction, as cities expands, the role of lakes have undergone a drastic transformation which leads to change in perception, the use, the build form and the identity to the lakes. So why there is a change in the relationship with the lakes? It's due to the isolated approach towards the lakes, due to the unplanned urban development and decrease in people association, which leads to neglect towards these water bodies and negligence towards the lakes by the local authorities as well. So studying the case studies in India, it showed mostly the conversion of water bodies were done into the urban settlements, which lead to unavailability of the water also, and the livelihoods are also affected. And we can see the decrease in number of lakes in increasing manner. So the key learnings from the literature review were the lack of accurate and standardized data and the active engagement of the local communities. So my research intent, the research follows an analytical approach to explore the relationship between ecology and its role in creating a sense of place. So the methodology followed was to understand the relationship with water bodies and build, which gives identity to the place, which is focused on two terms, that is water urbanism and identity, which gives lakes as an identity and established through ecological identity and social identity. Further, the parameters were formed to study, that is the ecology, physical urban form, social activities and the perceptions of the people to understand various parameters. So the thesis aims to understand the interactions between social, spatial and ecological changes occurring along lakes in the city and integrate strategies to create inclusive public space. So the thesis focuses on the hypothesis that the integration of ecological based approach in the land use planning of urban development along water bodies with sustainable practices has potential to contribute to the resilience and establish a sense of place. So considering the city of Kolhapur, which is located in India, it was known as a city of lakes with 24 lakes and currently reduced to 8 lakes, which covers 3% of the entire cities. So starting with the people's perception, interviews were conducted at different lake locations to understand the positive and negative perceptions of the each lake. Then the accessibility of people to these lakes was studied, which shows there is a lack of public transport infrastructure provided. Also, the activeness of each lake was studied during the day to night time, which leads to the security and the surveillance example. Then coming to the each lake issues, different issues were found at a detail level, like hawking zones increases the garbage dumping around the lakes, the vending zones around the lakes increase the garbage, and then the four out of the 8 lakes, 2 lakes are privatized and 2 lakes are dried. So the study further focuses on 4 current publicable access lakes. So the parameters studied for the 4 lakes were as followed, like build form, the mobility, ecology, and the value and the perception of each lake. Then coming to the regional level mapping, the study focuses on Iron Macaque's theory, which studies the impact of urban development on ecological system with different physiographic maps and the values associated with it, which includes the elevation drawings, the hydrology and the catchment, which marks the flooding areas into the city, the soil, and the current vegetation into the city. Similarly, the value mapping for each lakes, which shows the recreational value, the water value, the historic value, and the scenic value, in which the highest shows the high importance into the city. Then overlapping method, which shows of the physical map, shows the urbanizable suitability. The dark ones shows that they are unsuitable for urbanization, and conversely. And similarly, the value mapping, which shows the dark value shows the areas for higher conservation. And overlapping these two layers, we get a conservation and urbanization suitability map in which 4 zones are created, like which to conserve, which to protect, which to conserve and minimal urbanizable, and last one is the urbanizable. Based on the suitability map, a strategy zoning plan is made in which guidelines are provided for each zones. And then an ecological integrated plans for the city is made in vision to make integrate lakes into providing identity to the city and providing a people-centric and ecological approach, which restores, reconnects, and revives the lakes into the city. Then coming to the catchment area, one of the lake was selected for the demonstration, that is Rankaya Lake. So why consider the catchment area? Because it is crucial to understand the pollution of the lakes, the streams feeding into the lake, and the area surrounded by it. Similarly, different studies were done, like the building use. So mostly it consisted of the residential area and the commercial area along the lake edges, the visual accessibility and the physical accessibility to the areas, and the activeness throughout the day into the areas. Similarly, the existing vegetation, the open and built and unbuilt spaces, which gives an opportunity to transfer these spaces into permeable surfaces and green zones, and the public infrastructure. And coming to the neighborhood areas, I have marked the festive route maps, which makes the area more private, and active mapping into the areas. The build currently dense build form, the high-rise buildings and the moderate build, and the edges and the nodes around the lakes. So this is the existing lake conditions, the current plant species found, and the bird species, which shows, okay. So, showing to the structure plan, which shows objective to establish interconnected among the lakes to promote biodiversity and ecological resilience. And these were the strategies involved to show connectivity, ecology, development, and the social spaces, providing guidelines into the area, the stakeholder role, and the proposals for existing and existing areas. Revival of the dried lakes, the age details, and the junction details and the node details to be specified. So in conclusion, the research highlights the interconnection between ecological and social, aim to restore urban lakes, and it encourages inclusive decision-making processes. It provides a framework that can be applied to other urban lakes facing similar challenges as well.
Okay. Thank you, Shweta. I have a question, actually. I quite like the idea, the way you have looked at the master plan of the city based on these lakes, which you think are very important. But you said, of course, that there used to be many more lakes. Now there are only these are the 3 big ones left. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And the ones which have been lost, they are being used for some other urban function. Is it right? For buildings?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Mostly used for dumping areas.
But there is a chance of reviving them or not?
Yes, there is a chance.
So you could, that's just a suggestion. You could have sort of also taken 1 or 2 places which are not lakes, but which could be revived, right?
Yes.
You don't have to answer this question because it just goes from your time. I'm just making a suggestion. I like the fact that you made the structure plan based on this, etc. But are there any other natural elements which were important in creating the structure? Because you have used this ecological or nature, natural elements of lakes as a starting point for creating the structure plan, which is very good. And it was in one of the drawings, it was very clearly visible how the lines, connect them. But were there any other natural elements like, I don't know Kolhapur, but ridges, there are forests, there could be other natural elements which could be also determinants for that structure?
Yes, actually there are forests and river, which is the Panchaganga river along the city side. But due to the limitation of study of the lakes, I took the starting point as the lakes.
Okay. Other jury members. Liesl, you have something?
Let me come in then.
Sorry. Yes, Claudia.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. You come out with a proposed ecological integrated approach to actually bring forward your structure plan. You went a little bit too fast on showing what the outcome is of your proposed approach. So my question to you, what is that? Could you give us one example how this approach actually works in the reality, in a certain detail that you say, yeah, this is what I mean?
Okay, I'll get back to the slide.
Meanwhile, Liesl, is there a question which you want to ask? Because maybe she can answer both at the same time, or
so,
is it?
In this is the existing edge along the lake with the congested areas. So providing privately owned public spaces along the edges and the spill out areas give a different identity to the lake, and also the concretized edge along the lake is then converted into the ecological edge. As shown into the view of the boardwalk along the lake in the riparian buffer, and including the public community engagement and the municipal, that is Kolhapur Municipal Corporation, the study of the further can be done.
Okay. Liesl,
over to you.
Yes. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I actually have a question because, and maybe you mentioned it in your thesis, and I didn't pick up on it then, but at the moment, or you had a slide sort of showing the sewage runoff into the lakes.
Yes.
Do any of your proposals address that? Because I think the quality of the water is obviously something that also needs to improve if you want people, if you want to improve the ecology of the lake, or if you want to make the lakes more attractive for people.
Yes. Actually, I have provided the water treatment plant's position into the master plan, but not in detail at the site level. And in one, just a second, and in one area, like this is, I'm reviving the old dried lake. This is the informal settlement in which I have showing the DWAT system, that is decentralized waste system, in which all the waste that is generated into the areas is then treated and used for other purposes, so that it doesn't enter into the lakes. So this structure can be followed into various lake areas.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have some time? Okay.
Yes.
Shweta, thank you for your presentation. I think the idea is quite interesting that, how lakes can be revived because they've been being consumed so quickly as urbanization is expanding. I have a very specific question. The way you have presented this project, it's interesting that, it's academic work. But if you could, possibly help us understand, because it's actually a very big project for a scale of a city of Kolhapur. How will you be able to bring down all the stakeholders, because there's water systems involved, there's road engineering involved, there's housing department which will be involved. And I'm sure, there are these, because you said informal settlements. So how do you think that, a project like this, it's interesting to see all these visual, it looks very sanitized, it looks very crisp, precise, the way you presented your drawing. But how do you think that, all these stakeholders who own parts of this lake in certain way, how would you bring them all on board to agree to the vision which you want to sell them?
So
that's my question. Yeah. How do you?
So it has to be done through exhibiting the work and through the collaboration of the municipal corporation, and help the people understand why it is important and what are the future positive effects that they will get into the area. So maybe that's, and with stakeholders of different authorities, NGOs, with the help of them, we can go further.
Yes, that question can take days to answer, so that's okay. Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Shweta. Okay. Yeah. So now we can welcome Ahmed Badreddin Hassan Hussain from Ain Shams University, Cairo. We have always had interesting candidates from your university. So I'm sure you will have something interesting to tell us. You have obviously been shortlisted for this. And you're going to talk about issues of water in historic city of Cairo. So
thank you.
The floor is yours.
Hello and welcome everyone. Today I'm going to talk about water-sensitive urban design approaches in historic sites. Mainly, I'm focusing on Al Khalifa neighborhood, which is in the heart of historic Cairo. First, I would like to point out to the global water shortage, which the entire group suffers, especially the global south, where more severe conditions like water scarcity is currently pressuring. The situation in Egypt is not any better. In 2030, we are going to reach the absolute scarcity, it's expected. And we are mainly dependent on the water coming from the Nile Valley, while the municipal water is increasingly going up. But first, we need to focus on the history of Cairo's water escapes. Cairo used to be very integrated with its water escapes, where lakes and canals used to be to go through its urban fabric, and people used to use this during the flood and during the drought seasons with different activities. However, with urbanization during the 20th century, it changed significantly. Many of these lakes was buried and changed with modern system like streets above the ground and the sewage system and the supply system under the ground. However, this can show exactly how urbanization versus nature works. When human thinks that they can fully control the situation with modernization. However, this was not the case in Cairo, and I believe in many other cities. As you can see here, Cairo, especially the historical part, suffers a lot from the rising of groundwater. Many streets, especially like in the heart of historic Cairo, like this street is El Mu'izz Street, where you can see water is flooding the street. From the water test, it's expected to be coming from the supply system, where it's announced to be from 30% to 40% loss in our water supply network in Cairo. That's why there is a discussion in the research about conventional and unconventional water systems, which the unconventional water systems, which is an integrated way of managing our water, tend to re-engage the natural water cycle in our cities more to make it cheaper, to make it more localized and engaging. However, these perspectives were mainly focusing on the global north, while in the global south, the situation is a little bit different. We don't have a lot of resources. Therefore, this approach talks more about protecting our resources or drought prevention, like the situation in Cairo. That's why in my research, I'm focusing on the potential of using water-sensitive urban design approaches in historic sites, and what are these limits in dealing with the historic, what are the impact on the urban fabric, the social aspect, and the economic aspect. As I said, I'm focusing on Al Khalifa neighborhood, which is in the heart of historic Cairo. And as you can see, it's a livable city. It represents the everyday Egyptian life. Also, it has a lot of historical significance in our city. And it suffers a lot from the groundwater issues. Many historic building and residential buildings suffer from rising groundwater. And as you can see here, it's in the entire street. However, the local community led by an NGO called Mgaura, I was honored to work with them during my thesis, started to get use of this water and see it as a potential to use in everyday life and in urban interventions. I used mapping, field observations, and of course, a discussion and interviews to collect my data. So I mainly focused on 4 interventions of these many trials that they did throughout the street. Some of them are small scale, like these 3 ones, and one is a larger space, like a public space. There is a variety of water quality here. Mostly high salinity water is dominant. However, in some places like these green places, it's more like drinking water. Water extracted can reach to 100 or more cubic meter per day, which is a huge amount of water. And there was several type of water collection in the street. Some of them are complicated, like a dewatering system that already exists in a historic building, and the other like using just a cistern, a historic system that spontaneously collects this water from under the ground or digging a deep well to get the water up. So the first part is a public space, which is an empty land converted to a public park that tried to reclaim the natural water cycle again by extracting water from two historic domes and taking it for the irrigation system of the park, which somehow created a decentralized system for this project, and it integrated the social and environmental needs that enhanced the biodiversity in the place. It also did some economic interventions for the people living there and some educational opportunities. However, the governance and the management of this area, it's a little bit vague, because this water lies in no man's land, so nobody actually knows who owns this water. Like, is it related to the historic municipality authorities, or maybe to the public municipality? It's not yet clear. The private and semi-public spaces showed significant part in this. It was more independent, more localized, more flexible technically, as they use the private roofs to make urban farming interventions that use this water to grow some food essentials for the residents. It can be less technical and less expensive. Yeah. And and also income generating. At the end, I will say that the semi-public, the private and semi-public spaces showed some positive results in this regard in terms of governance, and also some integration of the public in the management system of this entire intervention. My thesis ends with a couple of some principles and steps to be followed when we have interventions in historic sites. Most likely localized treatment and other resources of water we should look for, engagement with the community and their needs and their social and environmental needs. Of course, doing some sensitive and small scale interventions. And finally, the integrative process that can help both managing the intervention and also giving funding and secure funding resources. Yeah, so as a conclusion, I think the water-sensitive urban design approaches were heavily benefited the historic context. However, the water quality can set some limits, and the management needs is a huge concern in this part, especially in Cairo. And yeah, thank you.
Emma, thank you for your presentation. I think it's clear. I have a question before I give the floor to other juries. You showed us a world map in which Egypt was also black, which said that the water scarcity is a great concern.
Yeah.
But you show that the water table is rising in the inner part of Cairo.
Yes.
Right? And is it rising because of water leakage from the system?
I mean, it's not really clear right now. It's not 100% certain that this is only a water leakage. However, the water test showing that the water has some specifics exactly like drinking water. There are also some suggestions that this is coming from the buried lakes from the 20th century that I was showing in the beginning. And of course, the creation and the implementation of the underground metro system in Cairo helped significantly to close some water flows under the ground, not to reach to the Nile again, which also helps the situation. But so far, the indication,
yeah, you should try. Okay. If that is, whatever is the case, if I understood you rightly, what you're suggesting is that the water which is coming up you're trying to find a system of reusing it, using it.
Yes.
Okay. But by extracting it, will you not be extracting more water from the source somewhere else? I don't know. I mean, is that not a concern? You can just simply say yes or no, and we'll leave it to the other jury members to ask you because of the time.
I mean, sure, maybe, but but the source is still undefined yet. And
yes, okay. Thank you. Okay, Lisa and Claudia, Ashim, any questions?
Go ahead, Liz.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. You show different interventions so that one can do to reuse the water that's sort of seeping through the ground. How many of these have actually been implemented, or are they just proposals? Have these interventions been tested somewhere?
Yes, my thesis is already is an assessment to this intervention too. So all these interventions were on the ground when I was.
Okay, well, actually, yeah, they were actually done. Okay, because that wasn't clear for me whether they were just proposals or whether they were actually working. Yeah.
No, they are working.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite fascinating when we look at Fatimidi Cairo and we see the I would say the impacts of the whole irrigation system from the pharaonic period, where the water systems are all running under the historical part of the city. So my question to you is, you already made an attempt to say, yeah, the water table is coming up. This is a problem, but it's also a solution, given the scarcity that we have because the metro and all the other interventions are closing down this underground connection between the Nile and the lakes that have been disappeared. So to which extent you can make a more, let's say, scalable approach for the whole historical area? Because it's not only a problem in that neighborhood, but it's a problem that you find all over Fatimidi Cairo.
That's true. I think I also want to mention something related to the water table, because also like the pisometers that are digged in this area shows there is a separation layer of a rock layer that's separating the real water table of Cairo and this water, which also indicate a little bit that this is a drinking a leakage from a drinking water system. So this is also something to consider. And in this case, if I'm talking about the entire situation of historic Cairo, I will say that the ultimate solution is to fix the surrounding and historic Cairo supply and waste water system. However, I'm not sure, but in a Cairo in a city like Egypt, this is or like Cairo, this is very problematic and very economically a burden. So I would suggest that replicated small-scale interventions can help significantly, especially that this water exists in historic places or historic buildings that already push or pressure the municipality to find a solution to this specific place, and then it can help, and then this water can be distributed around.
So what you're suggesting is the multiplication of micro interventions. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. I think this is more viable and more economically sustainable to depend on initiatives that are small scale more than the larger scale to solve such a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ahmed, thank you for your presentation. I really liked, the way you're dealing with several issues by tackling water. I'm sure you would also, you're talking about water, but the interventions which already have been done shows that, there's a certain creation of public space within dense neighborhoods. And then also the communities are, sort of coming and possibly taking them over. I mean, at least what I can understand from the images. I just want to ask you one question about how is the community warming up to such solutions? I mean, when you live in cities, people are used to municipal supplies, which comes in your taps. So this is, let's say, this is, like a counter project to a larger system. So how does the community appreciate or see this counter project? How valuable is it to them?
I think the key answer here is how you really make it economically and socially responding to their problem. And I think in some interventions, for example, it was an initiative for the residents themselves that they started to see a water source. And currently, Cairo is suffering a little bit from an economic problem. And therefore, people are searching for a solution to respond to their food security and things like that. So they started to see this water as a way to grow plants and agricultural farms in their rooftops. Of course, with the help of an NGO like Megaura in this case, it helped them to implement some urban farms on the top of the roof. And that helps a lot the citizen to be aware of this resource exists. There was even like a funny story that someone already in front of a historic building started to grow some fish. Like he got some fish and he started to put them and to use them in the future. So people started to be aware that this source exists and they start to use it in their interventions.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think we are through the time. Afaq or not? Yes. So we'll end it. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Thank you for the presentation. Okay. Now we have Bhaskar. Is he there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Bhaskar.
Hi. Hello.
Bhaskar from CEPT University. We have earlier also had some candidates from CEPT, masters in landscape architecture, and you'll talk also about water issues in Monroe Island, south of India, right, Bhaskar?
Correct.
So, floor is yours.
Hi, good to see you all. I'm Bhaskar from CEPT University. This thesis, Water Assemblages Forms of Coexistence in Monroe Island, aims to address the critical environmental challenges threatening the delicate balance of the island, which is the largest island and water system within the Ashtamudi estuary in Kerala, India, which is also recognized as a Ramsar site. The project stems from the curiosity about my coastal landscape, backwaters and lagoons, features unfamiliar to me growing up in the highlands of Western Ghats. Fascinated by my state's estuarine systems, I was captivated by the serene beauty of Ashtamudi estuary and Monroe Island, where I experienced tranquility and connected to the local community. So this is a glimpse of the Monroe Island, locally known as Monroe Turuthu. Turuthu means island. So it's a Monroe Island. The land has evolved significantly over the years. At first glance, the landscape appears to be beautiful, serene, offering a picturesque view of the nature. However, beneath the beauty lies the story of challenges. So what is wrong with the place? These are the few problems in the island, but is this a common issue of a coastal town, or is it specific to this location? And if this goes on, what is going to happen in the far future? Looking in the larger context, India ranks among the 10 countries for most affected by climatic risk. Its geographic vulnerability, prone to hydrometeorological disasters such as floods and cyclones. Other problems are to be looked into. That is why it matters to address hydrometeorological disasters. This is how my study starts, actually. It is inspired from theories of assemblages, 1,000 plateaus, basically exploring how water self-organizes into various forms to create landscape of endless possibilities. Starting from the contextual relationship, Monroe Island is situated in the west coast of Western Ghats and at the confluence of Kallada River and Ashtamudi Estuary in the Indian subcontinent. Understanding the large system, various ecological risks of Ashtamudi is looked into, and the impact of climatic change and morphological aspects were also looked into. This Ashtamudi estuary supports rich biodiversity apart from the traditional livelihood like fishing and tourism. Protecting and conserving the vital ecosystem is essential for maintaining the ecological balance and sustenance of the local communities. Monroe Island, that I saw, people attracting, it's another water world where everything revolves around the water. At first glance, the island reveals the significant impact of tourism and duality of urbanization and alongside the ecological sensitive zones. But why are the natives leaving despite becoming the tourism and abundant aquaculture? What factors are making them not want to stay? Lack of infrastructure, challenges in agriculture, or something else? These are few glimpses of the island. So I created one methodology to understand the whole land, addressing 3 different cases. Like one is the understanding about the site, then sustainable, how water can be treated, then another how the socio-economic assessment also. So Monroe Island being an island of 13.4 kilometers square, a reclaimed land, features diverse elevation, the dynamic hydrology from Kallada River and Ashtamudi Estuary, and a rich in biodiversity. 58% of the land is distributed at 5 meters above mean sea level and a highest point of 21 meters above sea mean sea level. Changes in land use are seen from over time, like from agriculture, aquaculture to aquaculture only. Trends in landscape layers are seen, like pollution significantly threatens the phytoplanktons and zooplankton of the population, along with the concerns regarding wetland, avian, aquatic, and overall health stability of the ecosystem is questionable and concerning. Even the rise of the groundwater salinity experienced in the low-lying areas are also being looked at and understood. Then again, the cultural trends are looked into. Monroe Island's population coming under 10,000 in number is declining due to migration as residents seek better opportunities and infrastructure at the mainland. With heavier reliance on one-day wage job, the rise in tourism presents an opportunity to boost the local economy and create jobs and improve socio-economic conditions through enhanced infrastructure and new ventures. For sustainable water management assessment, observing the island's elevation, which correlates with the hydrology and placing the agricultural lands along the natural stream order. The Kallada River provides fresh water for the estuary and has an artificial channels to irrigation to support transport. Flooding affects low-lying areas at or below 1 meter of elevation. Correlating system, like all the layers are seen in 3 different layers, like people, water, and land. In low-lying areas where water inundates the land, the available land area is limited, and people inhabit with this environment. These sensitive zones various pressures and risks. In highlands, there are less ecological pressure, and compared to lowlands, they have experienced low impacts on tourism. So at last, the inference is that the trends, Monroe Island faces changes such as agriculture decline, land degradation due to salinity intrusion, reduced water quality, and pressure from agriculture, aquaculture, and tourism, which impacts livelihood and ecosystem. Despite these issues, the region benefits from stable highlands with abundant freshwater, thriving tourism driven by unique water and land features. After this, a vision is seen, like how to craft a landscape, a holistic approach to ecological restoration, sustainable water management, and tourism is aimed to creating sustainable island system where people can coexist with a minimal impact on nature, supporting both livelihood and environment. In perspective to this, a few case studies have been done, referred to develop the programs of similar scale. Thames Estuary Restoration Project is one of them, and a few sustainability goals were also looked into. Crafting the landscape again in the macro level strategies as the first layer. For this research, so these small dots in the map you can see is that like when it is related to people or land, water, these strategies were taken at the different zones of this zones in the macro level zone. Then to the next level for this research, I focused on the specific catchment area, selecting through self-analysis and understanding of the water dynamics. The selection was based on the presence of people, land, and water assemblages, and they had varying degrees of involvement. Out of these, one catchment was yeah. Out of these, one of the catchment was chosen where all these converge meaningfully. This catchment uniquely includes both highlands and lowlands, which again becomes the ideal case to choose a site to detailedly look into and also have a design in the future. In continuation, conducting a detailed analysis of the selected catchment focusing on aspects of the vegetation, soil, settlement, population, and water resources has been done. Based on this understanding, the findings are compared to the government guidelines to determine the implementation through TP scheme, town planning schemes for the practical applications. These are few ideas or strategies that I try to design on the site. Actually, in the this catchment is around 350 acres in land to give an idea of the area of this thing. So the master plan focus on the strategic landscape planning, preserving sensitive areas by buffering them from high activity zones. It establishes a water zone and minimizes landscape alteration while zoning the current and future land use. Phase 1, that is the second diagram, addresses salinity through innovative planting and water management, creating zones for freshwater and agriculture cultivation, along with wetland systems and natural treatment. Water movement is managed with sluice gates and tourism development is integrated. Phase 2 emphasizes regenerating the landscape and sustainably through crop cycling and saline tolerant species in aquaculture. After the implementation, over the time, habitat zones will be created in the landscape, integrating water and land use management to enhance ecological systems, like species which are like moving away from the landscape, like aquafauna, avifauna, and other aquatic species. The Monroe Islands plans divide the site into 3 zones: freshwater zones with elevated ponds and salinity management, crop cultivation, and aquaculture. Saline water zone, and for saline aquaculture and agriculture, and brackish water zone that filters effluent through the constructed wetlands before releasing it to the estuary, with water flow managed by sluice gates. Monroe Islands plan features eco.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Bhaskar,
Yeah.
we'll see if one of the questions can give you the chance to explain something else.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
I'm looking if any of the jury members. I must compliment you for beautiful graphics to start with. Some really beautiful drawings.
Yeah.
Very tastefully done. But I'll leave the content questions just now to the other jury members.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ashim, would you have something? Because you are very much an expert in water issues also. So.
Yeah.
Sure, you have something.
Bhaskar, thank you for your presentation. I think it was very, it's very visually driven, your whole problematics and the way you have structured the issue. I think it's quite interesting that, Kerala being so dense and, you counter this, you come across that, that Monroe Island is being deserted or people are, out migrating for better issues. So I think that's a very critical question embedded within the landscape.
Correct.
You're a landscape architect by background. And I think what I found very interesting was that you have correctly represented socio-ecological systems, that how the problems are embedded.
Correct.
But what I see in your, you talked about that, that the way you want to move forward implementing this landscape plan, you chose a very administrative term. You use the term, I think, TP schemes.
Correct.
So my question is actually linked to that. Do you think the way, because TP scheme is again about plotting, divisions, land use, putting infrastructure. Do you think that what you want to envision in terms of monsoonality, you're saying that, monsoon is driving your phasing.
Correct.
Do you think that's the correct way to, develop a plan like this? Or do you think that, a TP scheme will be responsive enough to absorb, these elements of, the socio-ecological degradation and it responds correctly? Do you think it's a strong framework to implement your project?
So the way I just looked into TP scheme is that how can we if you are doing something in the land, there should be some administration that has to be looked into. So if I'm constructing communal ponds where fresh water can be holded. So for that scheme, I thought like the plan was to like collect land from different people, where the scheme says like if I'm collecting 10% of the land from person A, that person can get another, like as a remuneration or as a replacement, they can have another part of the higher lands of the land. So that was the idea, like to get something from them, give something as part of the TP scheme. That was
So
the basic
sorry,
idea.
sorry.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
so my question is like that, did not vernacular learning or local traditional knowledge was already aware of this, that they would know that you build on a higher land and you preserve water on a lower land.
Yeah.
So
So
that's my
that
question, that why are you focusing so much on a
so that
bureaucratic frame rather than building it up from ground,
correct,
how local
correct.
communities actually have done it for the
So
centuries.
so the currently, like they are the land and the water is saturated at the max, and people are dropping their agriculture practices because of the high nutrient contents and high salinity, which is created by them only. Like they draw in water from the estuary and made them stay inside the land, inside all these fields where they do aquaculture, and this practice is getting repeated again and again. But if you look into the larger scale, for example, Vembanad estuary, there is a system where two types of there is a balance for aquaculture and agriculture. There is a cycle of agriculture and aquaculture practice that used to happen. There's a plant species called as locally called as pokali. So during monsoon they would do that, and during summer where the salinity is high, they would do the aquaculture cultivation. So that system is completely gone, and people don't want to try it at all because of these challenges that they are facing right now. So they're trying to get like new jobs and move away from the place. So if some of the administration is part of this whole system, like at least there can be a small nudge where some part can be like bring up some change in the land and water and the livelihood of the people. So that's how the TP schemes came in. Like how can we acquire land if you're doing something for the common, like
Doctor,
as a common area? Sorry, yeah.
just a moment. Let me try to help you.
Yeah.
I think time is very short, so you shouldn't
Correct.
spend too much time answering a question. Liesl, do you
No
have
problem.
any specific? Claudio?
Sorry?
Yeah, I was interested to look at the how tourists, I mean, the future of Monroe Island has to do with economic development that will lead to perhaps more opportunities and sustainability. So,
Correct.
and you raise the issue of tourism. So I want to understand why the tourism and how do you see tourism as a way to solve the problems you encountered and showed us in your analysis.
So Kerala being one of the region where tourism is booming currently, if you see like internal tourist growth, you will see. I mean, domestic tourists, there is a 20% growth, and foreign tourists, if you're checking the numbers, it is like 80% growth in people. So and currently in terms of Monroe, people are relied only upon tourism currently. They are taking tourists around in their buns, and in the estuary part, they are taking tourists in their canoe boats, then in their coracle boats. That is how currently the livelihood, and they are very comfortable with that also. So along with tourism, uh, tourism being one of the important thing where they can be aware of what is happening around, like people are coming in. So and if they are doing the same practices again and again, which degrades the whole system, um, like they'll get to know what is going to happen, and they and a small part of the community already knows, like if they are doing something this again and again, like for example, they are planting mangroves all over the edges of the estuary actually. So they know like it has to be there. That helps the um, ecology to sustain. Their fishing practices that used to be there are like can be revived. There is an idea in their mind, but not to the whole island people. But they are just like most of the people are trying to leave the place because of all these issues that is happening. then they are not able to sustain only with tourism also. I hope I got like, yeah, like it's all connected in a whole sense. Like tourism, their livelihood, their aquaculture practices, and their agriculture practices are all connected together, and that is what that can be a sustainable way for the people to coexist in the land and also the water.
Thank you.
In the long term. That I think that's your
exactly,
point, yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
In the long term. That's what you're saying. What is happening now is happening now, but what will happen in the long term because of rising sea,
exactly.
etc. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Afaq, we are through the time. Afaq?
Yeah.
What? No time. Okay. So, Bhaskar, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For explaining this to us.
Yeah.
Now we are on to the last presentation now. Ujjwal Prabhu, is he there? Ujjwal? Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
Ujjwal.
Yeah.
Okay. Ujjwal Prabhu from Master of Architecture, Urban Design, School of Planning, Mysore. I don't think we have ever had anybody from your university in the shortlist. So you're the first one. Great. You're talking about the area of Karwar in India. And please, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, I am Ujjwal Prabhu. Today I will share the story of Karwar, its natural ecological features, environmental challenges, and how my thesis envisions a resilient future for its urban environment. So next. Flooding is one of the recurrent hazards which happens all over the world. So be it 2022 Delhi, Chennai floods, or countries like Brazil have faced so many floods. Next. So even Karwar is one of the such cities which faces a lot of flash floods and fluvial floods over the years. So these are some of the photos of 2021 floods in Karwar. Next. So in order to tackle the flooding in Karwar, my thesis mainly focused on urbanization and nature through the lens of Karwar, exploring various nature-based urban design solutions. So this will have mainly three stages. One is ecological assessment. Second stage consists of problem identification, then design intervention. Next. So Karwar city is situated next. Karwar city is situated in the western coast of the India. Next. So the whole city is ecologically surrounded by various natural features. Next. In the north, we have Kali River. Next. In the west, we have Arabian Sea. Next. In the east, we have Kerhol Creek. Next. In the south, we have Western Ghats. So it is surrounded by the natural features. Next. So the growth of the city happens from southwest of the region because of the presence of a national highway, and it goes towards northeast. So there is less preference have been given by the urban development authority for the accessible green spaces that can be evident in the master plan. Next. So even if you look at the data, only out of 10.92%, only 3.5% is accessible for the public. So there is a lack of green spaces, accessible green spaces. Next. So the whole Karwar region is situated between ocean and the Western Ghats. So the elevation can be seen in the section which is shown, but the whole city varies from 0 to 17-meter elevation. Next. So when we look at the urban green map, the most flat lands has the more coarse grain of the urban green. Next. So even in the urban landscape typology, in the central part of the city has more bowl landscape where the water enters from the ridges. Next. So this is the main regions where the flooding happens. So these are the more flood prone areas in the Carver city. Next. So by looking at all these maps, we can next we can assess these are the ecological challenges faced by Carver city. Next. So this is the main area of the city where the study happens as well as the intervention happens. Next. So this area includes a canal and a wetland as well as a flood-prone area, a neighborhood. So I'm tackling all the three zone in different levels, such as uh, city level, neighborhood level, and street level. So when we look at the problems of the canal, it has more garbage disposal happens into the canal. The overflow of the canal happens, as well as the stormwater management is not proper to handle the cloud burst. Next, and even the streets in the central business district has encroachment from the encroachment from the vendors, as well as the road doesn't have a proper drainage system, which leads to the flood. Next. So these are the underutilized open spaces in the central part of the city where the neighborhood is present. This can be utilized for proper flood mitigation techniques. Next. So for strategies for resilient Quarry. Next, we have four main components. That is next, resilient triad. It contains community awareness, ecological preservation, and public health. Next. So these strategies can be implemented in different levels, such as street level, neighborhood level, and city level. Next. So next. So this has again the third part of the strategy is Karwa water plan. So this Karwa water plan has four components such as slow store, embrace, and discharge, which can be done in various naturally based solution for flood mitigation. Next. So these natural flood mitigation techniques can be given in a different design toolkit for the planners. So this toolkit involves street toolkit next, and ecology toolkit next, and canal edge toolkit. So by using this technique, by using these toolkit, we can do interventions next. So main objective is next. To enhance the already existing open spaces for flood mitigation techniques. Next, and to give public realm to create green streets and blue green way. Next, and to develop vacant lands as a water storage parks. Next, and to develop city level wetland as a green link space. Next, and to revive the canal. Next. So these are the guidelines provided for the intervention. Next, street guidelines. So these are the element. Next, and again guidelines for the green spaces. Next. So this is the intervention area. Next. So as a city level, if we see next, there are mainly three interventions happening. One is constructed wetland in the Sonarwada region. One is KHB Park neighborhood park, and another at the city level is Blue Greenway. Next. So when the cloud burst happens, the most of the water will be retained in the constructed wetlands, and the excessive water can be redirected directly to the subsurface storage, which is present underneath the neighborhood park in KHB area. Next. So this again the extra water which is present inside the KHB park can be again redirected to the another canals directly, then finally redirecting to the Arabian Sea, and the whatever water is remaining can be used for the public use. Next. And this whole blue-green way can be used as a cycle track as well as a walkway, along with activating the canal edge. Next. Next. This is a master plan with using toolkit. Next. This is the aerial view of the canal. Next. This is one of the intervention where Sunday bazaar can be happened by activating the edge of the canal and also various flood mitigation techniques are used in the canal edge. Next, even the streets. So this is the typical section where the public access can be seen and even the canal can hold more water during the crowd burst. Next, this is another section. Next. This is a KHB park where the subsurface storage can happen and community gardens and Sankara Plaza are used. The underutilized open spaces can be used in such way. Next. Yeah. So this is the city level park can be used as a lens space for the Karwa. Next. So these, the nature-based solution and community engagement are the innovative aspects of the this thesis project, and this thesis project also comes with various SDG, that is sustainable development goals, and harmonizing urbanization with nature and by addressing contradiction between development and ecology can be seen in this thesis. And we can also create the cities with not just resilience but also inclusive and vibrant and keeping the ecology in mind. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Ujjwal, for your presentation. You did it very efficiently. And Mitali, thank you for moving the slides for Ujjwal. Okay. Ujjwal, I have one question.
Yeah.
There is a premise in your thesis that there is a lot of water and it needs to be gotten rid of properly, right?
Yeah.
Be stored temporarily sometimes, and then at a certain moment you have to. What about the dry seasons? I mean, a canal like this in Karwar is in the middle of summer. Is it dry and empty of any water, or is it still getting some water from somewhere?
Yeah, sir. In the present situation, it is dry. So after implementing this strategy, so though whatever the subsurface storage water is there, that can be stored for the dry season. And another part of the canal where it is connecting to the Arabian Sea can be closed, and that whole canal can be activated for the public use. So that is the main idea. So that is what called the embrace. So this one of
I understand. Yeah, but then the water is it stagnant then in the canal because you are closing the you're not letting it water flow to the Arabian Sea. So what happens? It just sort of stagnates in the canal.
Yeah, sir. In the dry seasons, yeah,
it will. Yeah.
Okay. That can be again.
You'll have to figure out a strategy to take care of that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Other jury members. Sorry. Any questions? Claudia?
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. Interesting that you come with the toolkits and offering what you say a roadmap. You in the beginning you showed us that the city growth faces and you identify these flood-prone areas, which means you need to deal with more regular, if climate change gets scaled up, more regular flooding, which means you can protect from water and try to keep yourself away from water, or you can live with water and absorb that water and store that water for the dry seasons, which may come again very strong, right? Did you think about this like cities like Rotterdam, for example, is storing water under the ground. Realize that instead of letting all this water go with more strong and more regular rainfalls, decides to store the water. So how far did you think about these solutions?
Yeah, sir. As I shown the KHP park, there was two types of storing the water. One was in the constructed wetland, which is naturally. So when you store water naturally, it takes time to percolate inside the uh, land. So slowly the water table increases in the area, as well as we can store in the more engineering kind of way, where I showed the subsurface storage in, underneath the park. So actually, I did a case study similar to the Rotterdam, what you explained. So I taken the inspiration from there itself for the implementation of that subsurface storage.
Okay, thank you.
You know, since we are talking, Ujjwal, of Rotterdam, and I saw some of your public spaces which you designed with steps, etc. In Rotterdam, there is one particular square where that is used to collect water above ground. So the area which is normally an amphitheater, let's say, becomes an area which collects water during, also stores water for some time. So you can also do it above land.
Yeah, sunken plaza, sir.
Yes, sunken plaza. Okay.
Yeah.
Liesel, you spent a lot of time in Rotterdam also. So maybe Rotterdam is an interesting question to talk about, or something else. Sorry.
Yeah. Actually, I've what I notice about your interventions is they're all interventions in the public realm. Okay, because quite a lot of the water runoff also comes from buildings. So I was wondering if part of the strategy isn't, to also ask private owners of property what they can do to sort of store or to let water run off from their properties in a more gradual way, instead of just letting all the water run onto the streets. So have you also thought of these type of strategies?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So actually, in the guidelines, in the flood-prone area, I have given the whatever neighborhood houses are there, they should have a detention pond to store excessive water, and so that can be used like personally, as well as they can slowly let go of the water. So when flood happens, the excessive water is no use actually for the personal use. So that has been provided in the guidelines. So if I can show the slide, it is there in the guidelines. So
okay,
yeah, top. Oh yeah, this one 40. So in the second box which I've shown, there are green roofs and rain gardens.
Okay. Oh, these I see.
Detention ponds for the.
You went through this slide very quickly. So
there was less time to show the intervention. That's why.
Okay. No, because I think it's important to see it as, to prevent flooding. It's not just something that you do in the public space, but the catchment of water on private properties should be sort of part of the whole system. I think, if you want to tackle this in a proper way.
Sure, very good.
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, Liesel, because back to the Netherlands, Amsterdam put a whole program focusing on private properties to connect with the city strategy in terms of dealing with the amount of water that is coming. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. And it's an interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's how the community engagement aspects of the project also involves. So it cannot be done by the authorities itself. The community has to come, step up and include all these small things, because they are the main stakeholders. and they're
I guess that is an approach which will apply to most of the studies which we saw today, that the community needs to be involved. Ujjwal, what is the time left, or is there no time left? What is the situation? Sorry, not Ujjwal, Afaq. Sorry, there's no time. Okay, Ashin, sorry. Then we will skip any more questions. And thank you so much, Ujjwal. I think your presentation was quite clear. And thank you to all the other participants, because we have come with this to the end of today's session. There are a couple of things I just want to mention. Now the jury will deliberate for some time, and we have time till the 14th of February. Is that right, Mithali? Yes? I think 14th of February is the final award ceremony. And the awards are announced on the day itself. So you will not get to hear, you'll have to be there. And on that day itself, the people who win the awards are requested to make their presentation again. So those 3 winners, or if there is a joint winner, 4 winners, they will be requested to make their presentations again on that day. We will, as you know, there is prize money related to that we'll of course take care of. And I'm going to, there are 2 other things which I would like to say. One is that we have an agreement with My Livable City that the winner's thesis, in a very short form, every time 2 pages per thesis, are published in the next issue, which will be published in July. So we'll talk to the winners and see how that can be done. We'll guide you to make sure that you have a good presentable piece within 2 pages. That is one. The other thing is that while the jury will decide on the awards based on what you have presented and what you have delivered till now, I'd like to talk to maybe some of you about the follow-up of your thesis, if there is something which maybe DAIDA can support in another way. So I'm going to ask you to get in touch with Mithali and give your telephone numbers, because I'd like to communicate simply via WhatsApp and just talk to you for some time once in a while in the next 10 days. So all of you are requested to send your telephone numbers to Mithali, or Mithali, please give them my telephone number so you can establish separately contact with me. Finally, I want to thank the jury members for spending their time with us and asking questions. Clearly, there's not enough time to ask all the questions we want, but it is basically your talent which we are trying to make sure that we can locate it, and we can select on the basis of this and see if this can really help somehow also achieve some of the goals which DAIDA has. Clearly very large goals, so it's very difficult to achieve, but whatever little we can do in our own ways. Thank you so much. And I think all the participants can leave. And I think jury members, we have 30 minutes to just have a quick discussion following this, if you'll stay for some time.